today, again, we're starting a new series called It's Time. That word that Pastor Brad Leach gave us is going to kind of springboard us into that. And I am really looking forward to this series, really for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that our lead pastor, Pastor Jeff, said that this is going to be one of the most important series that we will ever do here as a church. So this is a really significant topic that we're going to be talking about, and it's all about grabbing hold of and applying God's assignment for our lives, and really the assignment that he's given us, the new assignment based on what Pastor Brad Leach said. And so we'll talk more about that, but specifically what we're going to be looking at is today, to kick things off, an interaction that Jesus had with a woman. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but specifically to look at it, I want to start at the end of it. Because the end of this moment, I think, will kind of help us relate to everything going on here. And so let me just kind of set this up. Jesus was traveling with his disciples, and he was teaching and preaching. And so he's traveling from one city to the next, and they stop in this one city called Samaria. And his disciples, there was a city in the country of Samaria, and his disciples go into the city to get food, and he just sits down and starts talking with this woman there. And when his disciples come back from getting food, they see him talking with this random woman they've never seen before, and they're like, what is Jesus doing? Like, who is this, and why is he talking to this random woman? And so they just kind of walk up and just stand there and watch and kind of hope that he will, but no one says anything. And so this woman leaves and goes on her way, and then they think that Jesus is going to say something, and then no one says anything. And so they're like, okay, well, we just came back from the city to bring you food. And so in verse 4, and John is one of Jesus's followers, John recorded a book of Jesus's ministry, and then that is what we read in the Bible in the New Testament, the book of John. And so they urge him to eat food. In John chapter 4, verse 31, here's what it says. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. So just pause there. I love to think about how this interaction goes down, because this is what his disciples went to do. You know what I mean? Jesus sent them away, and they were like, we're going to go grab some food and we'll be right back. And so then they come back and they're like, hey, we got your Chipotle order, Jesus. Here, you should eat this because you're probably really hungry. And he's like, I have food that you don't even know about. And he's like, well, can you cash up us for this food? Because this was expensive if you're not going to eat. You know what I mean? They're like confused. And that's what the next verse says. Could someone have brought him food? They're wondering. They don't say this to him. And this is what Jesus would do a lot. He would say something really cryptic to his disciples, and they would just sort of sit there dumbfounded until he explained it, which he goes on to do in verse 34. He said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. So the reason I want to talk about this at the beginning, again, in a minute, we'll look at this whole interaction. But the reason I wanted to talk about this at the beginning is because Jesus was crystal clear on what his mission was. He knew exactly why God had sent him, and he knew what God had called him to do. And so basically the point that he's making is, yeah, food is fulfilling. It's great. When you're tired and when you're hungry, it fills you up, and it fulfills you for a little bit. But nothing is fulfilling like accomplishing the mission that I was sent to do by God. So the way to true fulfillment is to complete the assignment that God has given me. That's what Jesus is saying. Now, we tend to relate, I think, more often to how the disciples felt in this moment, if we're honest. If it's between how Jesus felt and how the disciples felt, I think a lot of us, even those who may have been a Christian for a while, usually walk around with a general feeling of a little bit of confusion. Right? If we're honest with ourselves, life is so busy as it is, and we believe in God and we trust him and we want to do what he's asking us to do, but at the same time, there's so much going on, and sometimes, feeling like you're in the place that God wants you can feel like, I hope I'm in the right place. And this is how a lot of the disciples' interactions were when Jesus was on the earth with them, where they were like trying to figure it out, but not fully sure. And I think that's kind of how we are a lot. And so if you've ever struggled with that of, maybe you don't even fully know where you're standing, like, I want my life to count. We look around at people who spend their life chasing after things, and they chase after money, and they chase after success, and chase after sex and pleasure and achievement and recognition, and all of that washes away. right? And in the end, it doesn't matter. And so we know, okay, I want my life to count. I want it to matter. I want God to use me. But sometimes I just feel like I'm not entirely sure if I'm in the right place. And what I want to say is, if you have ever identified with that feeling, which I think if we're honest, we've all identified with that, at least somewhat regularly, of, am I doing the right thing? God, am I in the right place? If you identify with that, this is going to be a very exciting series. Because I believe, again, this series is called It's Time. It's time for us to grab a hold of what God has for us. God, I believe, wants to give us clarity, to pull us out of distraction and confusion into making an impact, stepping into the mission that he has for us, and true fulfillment comes from that. Really, this is what Jesus is saying is, and if we're going to trust Jesus to be the leader, we have to trust him in this too, that, okay, true fulfillment isn't going to come from anything else other than when we step into where God has placed us and what he's called us to do. And so again, in order to kick off this week, we're going to study this interaction in depth between. So we looked at the end of it, when his disciples come back and are like, you should eat some food. He was talking to this woman, and we're going to look at his interaction with this woman. But we need to look at a little bit of background between Jesus and this woman. We're from two different people groups. And so just a quick history lesson on these two people groups. And I know for some of you, when I mention history, I don't know if anybody else out there is like me and you just hated history. That was my least favorite subject in school. My dad, he would just read. I remember growing up, he would read Civil War novels for fun. Gag me. That sounds awful. I can't imagine doing that for fun. So I'll make this as quick and interesting as possible. Just stay with me. Okay. So Jesus and this Samaritan woman are from two different people groups. Jesus was a Jew, and this woman he was traveling through the country of Samaria. So she was a Samaritan woman. What you need to know is these groups hated each other. For hundreds of years, they didn't get along. Actually, they were originally, the Jews and the Samaritans, they were one kingdom. They were the kingdom of Israel. And this was like God's chosen people from the beginning. But they started to not see eye to eye in this kingdom, and they disagreed on a lot of stuff. And so they decided to split into two different kingdoms. And so now you have the southern kingdom, which is the kingdom of Judah. This is where the Jews are. And then you have the northern kingdom. It's established on the hilltop of Samaria. And so now you have the SmackDown WWE Jews versus Samaritans that lasts for hundreds of years. And they are divided on everything because the southern kingdom is looking at what the northern kingdom is doing. The northern kingdom was invaded. Again, this is Samaria. They were invaded, and they started to compromise on the standards that God had set up for them. And so pretty much at every turn, the Jews and the Samaritans hate each other. And now when Jesus and this woman interact, there has been hundreds of years of a history of division in every way. Politically, ethnically, racially, spiritually, they do not get along. They don't associate. They don't talk. They hate each other. And it's been that way for a long time. And okay, so this is important to know. When Jesus stops in this town, there's a Samaritan woman who's at a well, and he's been traveling, and so he's tired. He stops at this well, and he asks this woman for a drink. And we'll pick up now in John chapter 4, verse 9. So here's what it says. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. So how can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews don't associate with Samaritans, right? So basically there's the history that's shown right there of we're not even supposed to be talking because our groups can't stand each other. We don't associate. And then Jesus answers her, not even directly. Here's what it says. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. So let me just boil down what Jesus is saying here, because Jesus is sort of speaking like Yoda when I read that. Like it sort of feels like backwards. Really what he's saying is if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for water. Not for physical water, but if you knew that I was the Son of God, that's God's gift to the earth, you would be asking me for living water, meaning eternal life and forgiveness and for a true relationship with God. So he's like, I'm asking you for water, physical water, but if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me not for physical water, but for living water and for life. And then she is not really tracking with him. And so she answers back, "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with." And so she's talking about physical water in the well. "And the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? And so now he can see she's not getting it, and he explains a little more. Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water, the water at the well, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water that I give will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So he's expanding what he means. He's saying, I'm not really talking about physical water here. I'm talking about something totally different. And she responds back. And I almost read, I don't know if she was actually being sarcastic, but I read like a little bit of sarcasm here in verse 15. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water then, so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. Like, if you got that, then just give it to me. Yeah, if I never have to be thirsty again, I'll take that kind of water. And so then now here's a turning point. In verse 16, he told her, go and call your husband and then come back. And she says, I have no husband. Now, I want to pause here for a second because this feels like it takes a huge turn and it's not related, but it actually is really important to see what Jesus is doing. He's actually explaining through a personal example what living water is. So he's actually not changing the subject at all. He's using a personal example from her life to point to what living water is. And so he says, go and call your husband. He's never met this woman before, but he says, go and call your husband and come back. She said, well, I don't have a husband. He responds, and Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. So Jesus, again, never met this woman, but God had revealed to him supernaturally these details about his life because he was pointing out something to her. She had been through 5 marriages and now was with a man that she wasn't even married to. And what this was a point of guilt and shame for her life. Because getting divorced was very shameful. It was illegal to divorce your husband. So either she was illegally divorcing her husband over and over again and getting remarried, or she was provoking her husbands to try to get them to divorce her. But regardless, she kept coming back to marriage after marriage looking for fulfillment, and Jesus is putting his finger on that. He's saying, yeah, you know how you're coming to this well for water to get a drink of physical water? There's also another area of your life where you keep coming back. You're not really fulfilled because you go to one marriage and then you jump to the next one. And now it's probably she's starting to feel some guilt and shame because probably everybody knows her as the scandalous woman who's traveling through marriage after marriage after marriage. And so now she recognizes this need of, okay, yeah, this is an area that I'm also doing that. And so I think she sort of starts to get it. And let me just sum up what she says next. I won't actually read this passage. Basically, she says, okay, so in order to get what you're talking about, this true fulfillment that I've been maybe searching in some other places, in order to get that, are you saying I have to convert to become a Jew? Right? Because I'm a Samaritan and you're a Jew, and clearly the Jews think that I should travel to Jerusalem and I should worship there. And Jesus responds and says, listen, it's not about what people group you're from. There's a time coming where it won't matter where you worship, but it will matter the condition of your heart and how you approach God. And then let's just read the last 2 verses here. Verse 25, the woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, the Son of God, is coming. And when he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. And so he fully reveals himself to her. And from there, she gets so excited because she realized that the Messiah has appeared to her and said, if you're searching for something, I am what will truly fulfill you. And so then she leaves and she tells everybody about it. And so what I want to look at in this interaction, the reason this is so important is that Jesus is modeling for us what it means to see the need in someone. It feels cruel at first, again, when you see that it almost feels like he's like poking and prodding at a very sensitive area of her life and saying, yeah, you've been divorced and everybody knows about that. But really what he's doing is he's wading through all of the division and the guilt that she feels to point out the fact that she has a need in her life, and a need that he's saying, if you really want to be fulfilled, you need living water. You need the life that comes from a relationship with Jesus. So Jesus is again clear on his mission, which was not to to go to the religious people who were acting super well and to high five them and to say, good job. No, Jesus came. His mission was to offer hope to those who were broken. Jesus, he knew what his mission was, which was to find those who knew that they had a need, who knew that they were broken, not those who pretended to be perfect, but those who knew that they were broken, and to offer hope to them. And really, this is what it means to follow Jesus. A lot of religion, and especially a lot of modern Christianity, I think gets it twisted in the modern world, where it's become trying to be a good enough person. We try to score well on our religious God exam of wanting him to approve of us by being a good enough person and by attending church and by doing spiritual things. But really, we're missing the adventure and the excitement and the life of what it means to be a true follower of Jesus, which is to live our life modeled after what Jesus did, to find those who are hurting and broken, not to just live to not fail, but to receive the assignment from God to reach out to those who are hurting and broken. And this really is the main thought that we're going to kick off this whole series with, the first week of It's Time. And that's the main thought, is this: we have an assignment from God. So if you tuned out for a second, tune back with me here, because this is everything right here. And I know this is a simple thought, but this is so true, and it's a powerful statement that we have a unique and a specific assignment from God, meaning we were not just sent here to coast through life. You were not just sent here to try to score well or win God's approval. You were sent here with an assignment to reach out to those who are broken around you. And I think this is what's so beautiful about this word that Pastor Brad Leach was sharing with us, is we actually, moving into this year, have a fresh new assignment spoken over this church. And that's so exciting to step into, because again, true fulfillment doesn't come from anything else. Everything else fades away except for when we step into the assignment that God has given us. So I don't know about you, but man, I'm looking forward to this, because my prayer is, God, if you have given us a new assignment, Lord, help us to not just hear the words, but help us to act on that and to find fulfillment by stepping into the assignment that you've given us. And so what I'm going to do is look at a couple of ways we can do that, especially based on the word that Pastor Brad gave us. And so here's the first thing. We have an assignment to build bridges and not walls. We have an assignment that God has given us to build bridges in today's culture. And it is today harder than ever to build bridges. It feels like every possible point that is like a possible point of tension is just pulling at the max, and it feels like it's about to, especially in the US, everything that we possibly could argue about, everybody's arguing about at all times. Like there's insane amounts of division at every possible point. And I think in some ways it sort of feels like the Jews and the Samaritans. And obviously it's not the same, but there is this intense divide in our world and in our country at every turn. And this is what this woman said. We'll look at verse 9 again real quick. She said, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. How can you even ask me for a drink? Because we don't associate. Our people groups don't associate." And I think that's a lot of where our culture is today. But what Jesus is modeling for us, and the assignment that he's giving us stepping into this new year, is modeling for us what it's like to see the need of people beyond all of the division that's happening. Because there is pain and there's division and there's hurt and there's bitterness everywhere. It feels like it increases daily and by the year. And so I think the question that God wants us to answer is, okay, God, where can we begin to bridge some of the division that's happening? Where can we take a step to bridge the divide and see the need that's in people's life around us? This is the assignment that God has given us. And again, I think like we can see the depth of the divide if you go on the internet for 10 seconds. You know what I mean? Like if you scroll on Twitter for a minute, like you can see everyone is always fuming about something. And so this is, for me, this is something that I feel like as I've been praying, I have to be really careful about, is we're more connected as a society and as a world than we've ever been, but we are arguably more divided than we've ever been. And so what I have to be careful of is it's very easy for me and probably for you to go on really any social media site and just get stirred up. It's easy to see something that you disagree with or that you agree with and that stirs up frustration about an issue or about another people group or whatever, or you can see somebody you disagree with and it just gets you frustrated and bitter. But here's what I've discovered is that anything that stirs up division in me, anything that stirs up frustration and bitterness blinds me. And so if I am always frustrated and bitter about everything that's going on and I carry that around based on what I'm seeing, it's very possible for me to be blinded about what God wants to do right in front of me. Anything that stirs up division has the potential to blind me. So I want to say, and I would love for all those people to say, Lord, take the blinders off and help us to see where there's so much division. Lord, help us to make our mark on this world and in our community by bridging where there has been a divide where previously no one else has been able to. Because wouldn't that be the mark of what it means to follower of Jesus, where no one else has been able to bridge division? We step in and we see the value of every person and we bridge where there has been a divide. And so the question we can ask, you can give it up for that. That's the prayer that we should be praying. Lord, help us to bridge that divide. So a great question to ask is, God, where are you asking me or us as a church to bridge division? In my community, in my city, and in this world, God, what are you asking me to do? Okay, second thing, we have an assignment to see and to hear people's pain and to listen to their story. We have an assignment to see that. And really, Jesus was the Jedi master of this, right? All throughout his ministry, we see time and time again that he was not finding people who were doing a great job and was like, great job. No, he was finding broken people who were outcasts, who had diseases, who no one wanted to associate, who there was division with, and he connected with their pain. And he saw what they were going through. He connected with their need. And again, in verse 16, this is where it feels like he's poking and prodding, but he's connecting with the need of this woman where he says, go call your husband. She said, I don't have a husband. You're right when you say you have no husband. In fact, you're on number 6 and you're not even married to the 6th. And it feels insensitive, but really what he's saying, he's pointing to her story and to her need and saying, listen, I know you have this need, but the answer isn't that you're not going to find it there. And there are so many people in our world today that are just searching and are desperate and they're looking everywhere, and we have the answer. And so what Jesus is saying is now it's time. That's what this series is about. It's time to take up that assignment and to go out into the world around us, to the people that are right in front of us, and to offer what Jesus has. Accepting this mission means that we see people's pain and we see their need and we see it through division. And even when people are spitting in our face, even when they are frustrated and they're angry with us, we calmly see through to the need and we understand that they are a broken person just like all of us that needs Jesus. And so the question we can ask, God, who is hurting that I may have missed? Who around me in my world is hurting that I may have just been looking over? God, open my eyes to that as I accept this assignment and as we as a church accept this assignment. Okay, number 3, we have an assignment to adopt their problems as our own. And I love this because what Pastor Brad says is, while we don't necessarily, it's not necessarily our fault, we accept responsibility, right? And if you grew up with siblings, I grew up with 4 siblings, you know the feeling of, when one sibling makes a mess and they destroy one room, and then mom or dad's all right, you guys all need to clean this up. And it's like, what? I didn't do that. They made that mess. And I have 3 kids at home now, so my oldest 2 do this all the time. I feel like this happened yesterday. It happens like every day. That's not my mess. They made that mess. They have to clean that up. Honestly, this is a lot of how our world operates today. That's your problem. I got enough problems going on. I got my own messes. I got my own things. But again, the unique assignment that I'm so excited that God spoke over this church is that there are problems that no one else is really willing to accept responsibility for, that now Jesus is saying it's time to, maybe even if it's not your fault, we're going to step in and accept responsibility for problems that no one else will. And really, this is what Jesus did for us. You know, when Jesus came and he lived a perfect life and he died on the cross to offer us this living water, this life and this hope of eternity, Jesus could have said, not my mess. You know what I mean? Like Jesus could have looked at us all and been like, you got yourself here. But Jesus took responsibility for what was not his fault, but he accepted responsibility to offer us life. And I'm so grateful for that. So what we can ask is, God, what problem do you want us as a church and maybe me individually to accept responsibility for? And I know this can feel overwhelming. I was talking to somebody last night afterward, and they were like, man, this feels like such an overwhelming problem because, you know, we've all got our own stuff. Like I've got so much going on with my family. So the idea of there's all this pain. They're like, I know what you're talking about. How can we deal with all of these problems that are going on? Which is legitimate. I mean, there's so much, but I think the thing is, this is why God has put us together as this church, not to be a Christian club where we pat ourselves on the back for doing well, but to come together and say, we can't fix everything, but everybody can do something. Right? We weren't all called to do the exact same thing. We were all uniquely gifted. And so I can't fix everything, but I can take on something. So God, what do you want me to take on? That's a great prayer to pray as we step into the new year of saying, okay, God, I don't want to just be wrapped up in my own world. God, I know that you've spoken an assignment over us, and I know that's where true fulfillment comes from. So Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want us as a church to do? But specifically, what have you gifted me to do? What have you burdened me to do that I need to step into thinking more about? Okay, last one here. We have an assignment to introduce people to the life that's offered in Christ. And this is what happens at the end of this story. You know, the woman leaves because she is seen by Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. She's seen not as a scandalous woman who shouldn't be identified with, not as a Samaritan who I can't talk to her because we're from different. No, she's seen as a hurting and a broken person who needs life, and she understands that. And so the God of the universe sees her, and she can't help but run and tell everybody. And that's what happens in verse 29. She says, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And so everybody comes and starts to make their way towards him. And really, again, this is what Jesus is modeling for us. This is what he says to his disciples. This is true fulfillment. Is when you find people who are hurting and broken and offer them true life. Not just something that's going to last for a day or two, but an eternity of life. This is what true fulfillment comes from. And I think everybody, you know, even a lot of us in the room, we end up being pulled towards searching for fulfillment in other things. There's things that are always, money. There's probably some of us even now in the moment that can't help but thinking about our bank account. And just sort of maybe a little bit stressed and that's pulling us, or about our family. We're taking care of our parents, or we're raising kids, or we're in school, or whatever it is. There's all sorts of different things that are pulling at our attention and we're searching for fulfillment from. But Jesus is saying, this is where you will find, you're not going to find it anywhere else. Nothing compares to stepping into where God has placed you. You know, this is what I have discovered, and I have to remind myself of. You know, when I was in high school, my dad's the pastor here. He's been the pastor here for a little over 30 years. And so, you know, growing up as a pastor's kid, I did feel this pressure to step into the family business. You know what I mean? It was like people were asking me, are you going to take after your dad? And I was like, no. You know what I mean? I don't want to do what my dad did just because my dad did it. And really what I thought I wanted to do, I love music. I we'll sing up on stage here sometimes. And what I thought I wanted to do was travel the world and be a traveling rock star. I was like so convinced that I wanted to do that. But then, you know, in high school, God opened me up to this experience for the first time of, man, everything else is going to fade away. But when you see somebody who has never experienced the life that comes from Jesus before, and they step into a relationship with him for the first time, there's nothing like that. Nothing is as fulfilling because everything else comes and goes. Everything else that I worried about back in high school and that I really cared about, I don't care, because it's all temporary. It's here and gone. But when we step into the assignment, what God has placed upon us, this is why this is so exciting, because God is speaking a word to this church to say there's something new coming out of where our world has been, the craziness. There's something happening where God is giving us the unique ability to step into a broken world and to offer life. And so this is what this series is about. It's time now to step into the world around us and not to just look inwards in this building, but to say, God, who around us needs you? So God, we're ready for that. That's the prayer I want to pray. And again, the question we can ask is, God, who are you directing me to that needs your life, that needs a relationship with you? Because that's the only thing that brings true fulfillment, is a relationship with God, our relationship, and then stepping into the mission and the assignment that he's given us. So here's what I want us to do. We're going to apply this in a couple of ways as we end. One of the things we're going to do is as we head out into the concourse afterwards, or as you're ending online, we want to help you get connected with a life group. And here's why. For the next 6 weeks, our life group series launches this week. We're going to be studying this. It's time. It's all based on this series. We're going to be discussing this in depth. We want to help you get into a life group because Jesus did not design us or create us to live just isolated or just to live side by side in rows like that. I mean, this is great, but he designed us to live in community with each other, where we can support each other and where we can be there for each other, and where we can encourage and challenge each other to step into what he has. And so I know for some of us that the idea of maybe you've never done a life group before, you've been here for a little bit, or maybe you've just started coming and stepping into a group of people like that just does not sound like something you want to do. I get like making friends and getting into new relationships. I get it. It's awkward. It's hard starting to do something like that. But this is one of those things that is worth putting the work in for. Following Jesus isn't always about it being comfortable or easy, because it's really difficult. But it's the most fulfilling thing. And so a couple ways you can do this. If you're interested, we would love to help you there's life groups meeting all different days of the week for every age category, parenting and singles and married couples. And there's whatever age of life you're at, we want to help you get plugged in. And so on your Connect card, you can mark that off and drop it in the container as you leave. But also, out in the concourse as we leave today, buy the free coffee. We have just a bunch of free donuts. And this month is Live Connected month, because we want you to just go out there, have some donuts, hang out and talk, and then we'll have some staff walking around and just seeing if we can help get you connected somewhere. Because we believe that God designed us to live in community together. And so that's something we'll do in a minute. What I want to do now, though, let's all stand up to our feet before we dismiss together. Actually, let me just say this really quickly. If you're online, we want to help you as well. You can just put it in the chat there. If you're interested, go to AllisonParkChurch.com. You can sign up for a life group there.